Sam Horn reportedly suffered another arm injury here early during baseball practices. What does this mean for the 2024 football team? Let's break down all the possible ramifications right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and longtime believer in Patrick Mahomes, despite his love of baseball as well. But you know what? Before we get to Sam Horn, his latest injury, and also I want to talk about how Blake Baker was actually an accident. This should make you feel good about Missouri's prospects going forward in football. But also quickly, just let me remind you that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. And according to Gabe DeArmond over at Power Mizzou just about an hour or two ago, dropped a bit of a bomb on us over on his premium message board saying, quote, Sam Horn suffered an early setback in baseball practices on his right arm per multiple sources. Missouri is seeking another opinion later this week to determine what steps to take going forward. There's a wide gulf of what could happen. He could shut it down in baseball and still go through spring football and be okay with some rest. The worst case is Tommy John surgery, and he's out another 12 to 14 months. I need to stress that neither determination has been made yet. Now, this is Gabe continuing here. I would be surprised to see Horn pitch for Missouri this spring. Beyond that, it's to be determined. Hope to have an update for you early next week as far as anything beyond that. So there you go. A lot of speculation can be done there. A lot of possibilities between Tommy John surgery and, hey, he's probably going to maybe shut it down for the rest of baseball season. Kind of like what happened last season when Horn, early in the Missouri baseball season, actually on the mound, left the mound after throwing a pitch, obviously felt some kind of pinch, some kind of pain in his throwing elbow, and shut it down in terms of baseball for the rest of the season. Now, we saw Horn obviously was a full go for football, all fall practices, the whole deal. Horn appeared in at least one Missouri football game, the first game of the season. I believe he was in there to at least hand off a time or two as well when Cook had to leave the game for a moment as well. But bottom line is, obviously, if Horn is fine, if it's going to be like last year where maybe he misses spring ball or something like that, but is going to be fine for fall camp, best case scenario, well, then you don't really need to add another quarterback, do you? Use your presumptive backup. There's a reason you didn't go into the transfer portal in this previous window and get a veteran player because you thought, well, we've got Cook as the entrenched starter. At the very least, Horn should be a capable backup. But now, not only is Horn in jeopardy here, you've seen Jake Garcia transfer, the veteran player from Miami and USC. I believe he ended up at East Carolina. You've also seen Jabari Johnson, who was a true freshman last season. Well, he's now back closer to home at Oregon State. So Missouri, as far as experience and just talent on the roster at quarterback right now, is really, really thin. If you assume Sam Horn isn't going to be there, well, I think the next time the transfer portal opens this spring, I think you've got to see Missouri is going to be active there to at least get a type of player who can be a veteran backup. I think that's at the very least what you've got to expect from Missouri. I've seen some consternation from fans saying, well, Missouri should have gone into the portal earlier than this. I don't know that that's really a fair criticism because if you think about the type of player that Missouri was going to obtain at that point, listen, all the players can tell that Brady Cook is the entrenched starter. Obviously, Horn is a guy who's really thought well of, has 2 years in the system now, in the program. They can see, hey, not a real obvious path to any type of playing time here. Well, now if you're a veteran player who maybe second or third on the depth chart somewhere, especially if you're third on the depth chart at a Power 5 school, maybe you would consider a place like Missouri and say, hey, I can be the backup here, and if Cook happens to get injured, well, that'll be my opportunity to shine. Again, I think somebody like Jake Garcia is probably a likely option for Missouri. Think that type of player who's maybe bounced around once or twice at the Power 5 level looking for an opportunity. Well, I think that could happen here this spring for the Tigers. And on Missouri's new defensive coordinator, Corey Batoon. Well, to any fans who are not blown away perhaps by Batoon's resume at this point, well, I'll remind you, because frankly, I had to be reminded recently that Blake Baker was not originally hired at Mizzou as a defensive coordinator. In fact, Baker joined the Mizzou coaching staff as a safeties coach in January of 2022. It wasn't until February of that year, the next month, where Steve Wilkes decided to resign in a bit of odd and not great timing. And in part of that, well, a couple weeks later, Eli Drinkwitz decides to promote from within, even though Baker had only been on staff for about a month, promoting Blake Baker to be his coach, his defensive coordinator. So here's the thing. I don't think at the time, my point here is that at the time, most Missouri fans were probably going, gosh, that was less than great timing. We were kind of hoping to keep Steve Wilkes around for another year. It felt like the defense was at least improving in the back half of the season. And now we're simply hiring this maybe retread. You might have said that word, a retread from the University of Miami, who was only here as our safeties coach. Now he's the defensive coordinator. Well, guess what? And just a couple short years later, now Missouri fans are complaining. Some are even panicking when Blake Baker went to LSU. The LSU Tigers obviously thought so much of him that they paid well over $2 million a year in average annual value to take him. So all of that is just to say, when it comes to analyzing defensive coordinators, offensive coordinators, certainly position coaches, any of that kind of stuff, I just think we as fans have to humble ourselves a little bit and remind ourselves that, boy, there's just a lot of information that we are not privy to. And again, for the millionth time, I think we got to give Eli Drinkwitz the benefit of the doubt on this hire. And by the way, there's a lot of smart football people, in my opinion, that like Corey Batoon, so that's good enough for me. And I talked quite a bit yesterday about Missouri's $62 million anonymous gift, the biggest individual gift in the athletic department's history. Well, you know what? I want to give some more context on this particular gift, tell you what I think it means for Mizzou going forward. And it really, really is a huge deal. I don't think you can undersell it whatsoever. So let's give even more context here coming up in just a minute. But first, let's talk about game time. And what would you do with an extra $100 in Vegas if you were there for the big game? Would you buy yourself a nice seafood dinner? Well, I know what I would do. I would take it and I'd put it on Patrick Mahomes to be the Super Bowl MVP. That's just me. But you know what? Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the events out there, sports, music, comedy, and theater. And right now, all users get $100 off when you buy a big game ticket with code VEGAS100. You can see your view from the seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect. When you arrive, all-in prices show your total up front, so you know you're getting a great deal before you check out. And you know what? Big game tickets, Woo, $7,700 to get in the building. So if you really want to go there, I can at least get you $100 off. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Right now, all Game Time users get $100 off a big game ticket with code Vegas100. Terms apply. Just download the Game Time app and use code VEGAS100 for $100 off a big game ticket. Or if you're not going to the game, use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now you can also find it on Amazon Fire TV. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find the Locked On Sports Today channel now on Amazon Fire TV. And yes, I just realized I have a little bit more context for you. We're going to get to some context here in a second. Yes, $7,700 to get in to Super Bowl 58. That just happens to be almost exactly to the dollar what the county of Boone charged me for building permits most recently. Not that I'm bitter or anything like that. Nah, I wouldn't rather just go to the Super Bowl than get a piece of paper from the county. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it. But anyway, let's move on before I actually do get bitter. But seriously, let's put in a little more context about the $62 million deal, $12 million of which was earmarked for name, image, and likeness. Heck, I think at this point you could argue, man, maybe all $62 million should have went to name, image, and likeness, right? Because the days of glittering facilities being the one thing that can basically separate yourself, or one of the things money-wise that can separate yourself from everybody else, well, those days are kind of past us at this point. I honestly think, from my perspective as a Missouri fan, now that Missouri has that big and beautiful indoor football practice facility, what more do you really need other than, hey, upgrade the sound system, put in a new video board in the north end zone? I don't know that I really need all this stuff that they're talking about in the north end zone. But hey, Desiree Reed-Francois, she's got a lot better research, a lot better information on all this stuff than I do. So I'll put my faith in her at this point. Just thought I would bring that up anyway. But that $12 million, as I pointed out, as Pete Nakos, I believe his name is, over at On3 was the source I used yesterday for this. He was saying a lot of the top tier programs, hey, $12 million, that's kind of the upper end of where you would expect the sort of your salary cap, if you will, your full budget for the year for a football team and NIL. That's about right at this point. It's a pretty big number, kind of bigger than I would have expected, but apparently, according to Gabe DeArmond, that's about where Missouri was living this past season as well. So that $12 million for NIL, going to go a long way, and that's basically a free year of football when you think about it. Now, again, a little more context from the mailbag from Power Mizzou a couple weeks ago. One of their readers, Mock City Blues, asked, if you were to give an educated guess, where would you rate the Mizzou NIL? Would it be a top 15 nationally, or is it more middle of the road like a top 50? To which Gabe quickly responded here, I think top 15 is accurate, and I think top 10 is possible. Now, again, this was from a couple weeks ago. This is before the $62 million gift. So how I'm choosing to interpret that is that Missouri is rock solid in the top 10 at this point. If not the top 10, okay, 11 or 12 or something like that at worst. And again, as I was saying yesterday, none of this guarantees you an SEC title, a national title, a playoff appearance, or any of that kind of stuff. But what it does is it takes all the excuses off the table for the Missouri Athletic Department. No longer can you say, oh, the Georgia and Alabama, darn it, we're just at another level in terms of money. It's just going to be too hard to compete. I understand that those programs, hey, there probably are still maybe on another level than Missouri, and certainly in terms of resources, obviously in terms of history and prestige and all that. I'm just saying, once you have that kind of money, I think that all that prestige and all that stuff, I'm not saying it doesn't matter. I'm just saying to a 16, 17-year-old recruit, they're looking much more at what's sitting in front of them in the present, and that's the dollars and cents. So to me, that takes all that off the table, especially when you start to see more and more Missouri guys hopefully get drafted in the first, second round, that kind of deal, have successful NFL careers. The more Eli Drinkwitz and his staff can prove that they're capable of that, well, I think the rest of it's going to take care of itself. And for the 1,000,000th time, obviously this Missouri basketball season has gone pretty seriously off the rails. But if you listen to Dennis Gates and his staff this offseason, you certainly would not have expected this whatsoever. And I was among those people. I expected another pretty good season. In fact, I thought, hey, NCAA tournament appearance, that should probably be the goal once again for the second straight year. Well, that did not even come close to happening. And actually, Dennis Gates and his staff, well, apparently they were telling a lot of people that, hey, this team might even be better than last year. And I'm really curious to see how Gates and his staff actually handle this next off season in terms of what do they tell reporters? What do they sort of leak to reporters, if anything, this coming off season? Because I really feel like in particular, the hype for Trent Pierce this offseason obviously got a little bit ahead of where his actual production came in his freshman season. But I just wonder if that actually hurt Missouri at a certain point, if it actually hurt Trent Pierce. Don't misunderstand, this really is a small quibble, not some massive criticism that I have. Again, it's more of a curiosity to see if maybe Gates tamps down the hype next offseason a little bit more as opposed to feeding into it, because while certainly there's an upside, there is a reason at times to hype up your own players in the media. I think what we saw here maybe is a little bit of a downside of that strategy. And speaking of downsides, well, there's been some massive news in the world of sports media here. ESPN, Fox, and Warner Brothers Discovery have announced a joint venture to bring us what I would call a big, skinny sports bundle via streaming. So if you're a cord cutter like me, this is pretty exciting news. And for the most part, I think this is all upside if you're a Missouri fan. So let's talk about this coming up in just a little bit, but also I want to tell you about FanDuel Sportsbook. Happy Super Bowl to all of you out there from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, you got to put on that Patrick Mahomes jersey and just try your best to keep the nachos off of the front of the thing. Easier said than done from my experience, but you know what? Here's what I'm into. It's still just Patrick Mahomes to win the Super Bowl MVP, plus 140. To me, that's the best value on the board. Let's not overthink this thing. But you know what? If you're into some other action, you got to find it at FanDuel, who has so many ways for you to end this season with a win or two or three. And not only can you bet on the winner of the game of Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has plenty of player props on who's going to score the first touchdown, any touchdowns, period, in the game, total points scored, and so much more. New customers, join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So Disney, essentially ESPN, Fox, their sports division, and also Warner Brothers Discovery Sports division, all coming together to launch a new streaming platform, launching this fall. And you can get bundles of this thing. Apparently, you'll be able to bundle it with Disney Plus, Hulu, or also the Max platform as well, which is Warner Brothers Discovery's thing. Now, what this is, essentially, this is going to be a skinnier bundle than your cable or satellite package. Or if you're like me, you might have the DirecTV stream package or YouTube TV, something similar like that. A streaming package, but again, it's the fatter package where, hey, yeah, I want all these sports channels, but in reality, they're going to throw in a bunch of cooking channels or something like that I'm not really interested in paying for. So what this is all going to encompass, essentially, from Disney's side, it's going to include ESPN and its other networks like, of course, ESPN2, and importantly for us Mizzou fans, the SEC network, as well as ABC Sports broadcasts. And all the ESPN Plus content apparently is going to be thrown into this bin as well. Now, Warner Brothers Discovery, their networks include TNT, TBS, and True TV. So we're talking about all of your March Madness content, all of your NBA content, also Major League Baseball playoffs, the NHL, all that kind of good stuff. Now, on the Fox end, that's of course talking FS1 and importantly, the Big Ten network as well. Now, obviously, that basically encompasses all the sports I could possibly want as a consumer, with one very notable exception. It's the St. Louis Cardinals and the Kansas City Royals. Basically, local Major League Baseball is still out here. Bally Sports, it's its own thing that is not part of this. Also, Comcast, which includes NBC, Peacock, and Paramount, which includes CBS Sports Network. They're not included in this as well. But for the most part, that's going to take up 90% of your sports watching, I would say. Now, the thing is, one of my biggest things here is I think this whole thing, I think it's good for college football fans for the most part. This is bad for Major League Baseball because, again, this is just yet another way where your Major League Baseball seems to be making it more difficult than necessary to subscribe to their product. Quite frankly, the only reason I have DirecTV Stream right now is so I can watch baseball. That's it. Otherwise, I would have just cut the cord on that particular product and just watch all the other sports we've talked about via ESPN Plus or what it might be. So I think we're just about this close to getting there. And by the way, as a Royals fan, for $20 a month, which is a bit of a steep price, but still, when you consider the DirecTV is $100 a month, $20 a month to be able to see the Royals, the St. Louis Blues, and the Memphis Grizzlies and the Oklahoma City Thunder of the NBA as well. Hey, I guess at the end of the day, that's not the worst value in the world considering what else is on the market. But for that $20 a month, you don't get the St. Louis Cardinals. Again, this Bally Sports thing, I really don't understand all the ins and outs of how all of that works. Frankly, at this point, as long as my wife can still get her Andy Cohen universe stuff, all the Real Housewives junk and Below Deck and all that stuff, because everything else she watches is mostly on Netflix at this point. I frankly couldn't care less about watching legacy corporate media news, no matter what side of the coin it is, whether it's CNN or it's Fox News or any of that stuff. No, thank you. Thank you very much, in fact, for not making me pay for that, because there are so many better places to get information out there on the internet. I won't even get into what I'm into. I just promise you, if you're still watching that old corporate cable news stuff, please just find something new. There's better information out there, no matter what you believe or who you vote for. And ultimately, at the end of the day, what I think is interesting is that the SEC network still on Disney. That's what, that's the reason why I've focused so much on this ninth game. You notice that the Big Ten here, the only thing that's going to be, if you're a Big Ten fan, hey, all your games are mostly going to be on this bundle unless you're that Saturday night Peacock thing. See, that's one thing SEC has. If you're an SEC fan, if you have this bundle, you're essentially going to get every game, with the exception of maybe the non-conference football game. Maybe that'll be on BTN. Maybe every other year the bragging rights basketball game will be on BTN. But again, all that's going to be in the package. Missouri's never going to be on Peacock. They're never going to be on that Saturday night Big Ten special game unless, again, there's some non-conference game I'm unaware of. But 95% of the time, you're going to be fine. However, you do run the risk of piecemealing your product a little too much if you're the Big Ten, in my opinion. Not only that, but there is a positive side to it as well. If you're the Big Ten, you actually have more leverage because right now the SEC, all of their products are under the Disney umbrella. So it's harder to play leverage at this point. And I think maybe that's one reason why you're seeing that ninth game for the SEC that for months I had sort of assumed was coming. Well, we haven't quite gotten here yet. But bottom line is we could talk. There's so many different angles I could attack on this sports media deal here. The deal between, again, Warner Brothers Discovery, Disney, and Fox putting all of their sports programming under one umbrella. Again, for Missouri fans, if you're like me, if you're wanting to cut the cords, save a little bit of money on your cable bill, your television bill every single month, but you still want to get all the sports that you're used to, well, this is good news. I really think that it is. Now, having to figure out the Major League Baseball side, if you're a fan of that, well, that's a whole other issue. Frankly, for $20 a month, I'm not sure that I'm willing to pay $20 a month for another 100 loss Royals campaign. So I really think this is not a great moment for Major League Baseball, and they've got to find a better partner than Bally Sports because I just think their prices are too high, their tech is behind, their production is not very impressive. I just think Major League Baseball has got to find themselves a better broadcast partner one way or the other. But hey, bottom line, thanks for joining me as always here on Locked On Mizzou. On our next episode, I'm going to talk to Brian Smith. We're going to get into a recap of the 2024 football recruiting cycle. Look forward to 2025 as well. We're always a good episode with Brian, so look forward to that tomorrow right here on Locked On Mizzou.